Hello, everyone. I hope we made a Wayne's World reference right before they let me roll, so that's what you get. I hope you're having a phenomenal Friday. My name's Michael. This is the Friday edition of News, Games, and More. I'm here with, from the top left going around, let's see if I can do this, David Griffin, Zachary Ryan, and Mitchell Saltzman. I think I did the order right. Hi,
Crushed
guys.
it. Crushed
Hey.
it. Hello, Michael Swain.
Happy Friday. My finger even went. Now I can't do it, of course. But thank you so much for joining me. Glad you guys are here. Let's hop right into it. The headline story, in case you've been out of the loop for the last couple news beats, Microsoft had a big showcase conference where they gave us some, I think technically some of the first next-gen gameplay period that we've seen from Halo Infinite. It was met with mixed reviews. You can see some of it right there for yourself. And since then, 343 Industries, the developers, have come back. They've given us more details. And at the same time, just today, they confirmed a leak from a site called Smythe's Toys, which happens a lot. A toy company or a retailer will post the listing early. But 343 has since confirmed that the listing was legitimate, and it said, I quote, "The legendary Halo series returns with the most expansive Master Chief campaign yet and a groundbreaking free-to-play multiplayer experience." So that's the big news, is free-to-play multiplayer. Now, David, I'm going to go to you first and throw you right under the bus because you asked the question right before we started rolling. I'd love if you could re-ask it because I'll be honest, it's a question I have as well.
Yeah, because I saw free to play. I said, well, I know you can get, Xbox memberships, you can get Game Pass, things like that. But I was confused. Like, wait, well, if you own the game, you should be able to play. So what does free to play multiplayer actually mean?
Mitchell had the answer.
I mean, I don't have the 100% positive answer, but from what I would imagine would happen would be there would be two separate clients. There would be or two separate buttons that you would click on the Xbox home screen. You'd go into the main Halo game if you paid for the game, and then there would be a separate thing that you would download that would say like Halo Infinite multiplayer free to play. You download that, you click on that specifically if you wanted to play multiplayer, and then it would take you to multiplayer. And there'd probably be a way to switch between them, within the main menu.
Yeah. So again, to be fair, that's Mitchell's opinion about how he interprets the information. But it's interesting. We live at a time where the deployment of a game is so complex, it can be confusing to even navigate.
What
Dave,
was that, Phil Spencer? Phil Spencer in my ear? Oh, Phil Spencer just said I'm right. So
There's a couple things. There's a couple things to keep in mind here too, right? Because we know that Halo Infinite is being described as like more of a platform game. Like it wants to be something that has the longevity of like an ongoing game, and also we know that the Xbox Series X is capable of streaming and maintaining multiple games running at the same time. So the idea that you would flip back and forth between multiplayer and the campaign mode totally makes sense, especially given like the outline that Mitchell has put here, the way that the multiplayer would work. I think it's a really interesting choice for Halo. I mean, I think it's a really, really smart choice to make their multiplayer a standalone free to play product and then have people buy into the series from there. Like, I think it's brilliant.
Oh, absolutely. It's kind of the heart of the series, just thinking back to the days of LAN parties and like screaming down the hallway when your friend blew you up because you had to physically be together. Yeah, the game is obviously trying to be a return to the iconography of the early games and very clearly some of the story beats of the early games. And I think it's also trying to recapture what was culturally important about that moment when Halo first entered our minds. I cut someone off. Who was going to talk?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, some of the Modern Warfare or the Call of Duty games, notice when they're on Steam, have two different icons. They have one that you go in for the single player and one for the multiplayer. Now, they're not free, but I wonder, like Mitchell was saying, for Halo, if it's going to be something like that. I think I've seen that on Steam for PC before.
Yeah. Well, we do have a few more details, and of course, IGN.com. You can find great condensations and collations of everything we know so far. So I'm going to lift some fun bits from what IGN has reported already. The 120 FPS is apparently an aim for or a goal for arena mode on the Series X. Multiplayer will include a battle pass system and feature similar types of customization as the newer Halo games. So even though they've said explicitly they're going for a retro feel mechanically, there are innovations. We also, of course, saw the addition of a grapple hook, which is a whole new a whole new world for Master Chief. Yeah, and then today, 343, I believe today, if I'm wrong, it was yesterday, basically responded in full to mixed reactions, shall we say, and some downright criticism of the gameplay footage we saw. So I kind of wanted to throw those quotes at you. I'm going to do it in 2 blocks and get your guys' reactions, because I know just from meetings today, everyone has sort of an opinion on this. So the first block here is, and I quote, "Based on our learnings from Halo 4, Halo 5, and Halo Wars 2, along with strong community feedback," that's you guys, "we decided to shift back towards the legacy aesthetics that define the original trilogy. With Halo Infinite, we're returning to a more classic art style, which was a very key message going back to the very first reveal that garnered enthusiastic and positive response. This translates to a more vibrant palette, cleaner models, and objects with less noise, though it doesn't mean less detail. We appreciate this may not be everyone's personal preference. We stand by this decision and are happy to see it resonating with so many fans around the world." So I'm going to sort of go around the horn and just open the floor. But I do think you see riding a line there, trying to speak to the people who are loving what they see while also addressing that they heard loud and clear the people who weren't exactly like jazzed. I also thought it was interesting how they harken back to, remember what we're doing? It's a throwback. Remember, you all liked when we said we were going to go back to our roots. This is part of that. And I never occurred to me that an aspect of going back in time to your roots for a game like this could be taking away some of those things we've almost started to take for granted, like bump mapping of a bunch of pustules that make you look like you have a lot of texture. They appealed to the idea that this is a classic cleaner look. I personally thought it looked not great. I'm still excited to play the game, but it's interesting to hear it put in the context of, no, it doesn't look bad, it's cleaner, it has less noise than the models you're used to. What are you guys' thoughts on this? Someone jump in here.
So I think a lot of the issue that I'm seeing with Halo Infinite is that this is a game that obviously Xbox fans have been highly anticipating for a very, very long time. Uh, and it's also the fact that this is our first real introduction to what games are going to look like on the Series X. And so while I don't think it really looked bad, it didn't blow me away like I really hoped it would. And like I was watching that trailer and I kept on waiting for this moment where I was like, yeah, all right, that's Halo, that's the next Halo. And it never came. It just I was just like, this looks like Halo. And that's neither like a positive or a negative. It just looks like Halo. So yeah, those are my thoughts on it. With regards to the 120 frame rate thing, I think that's an interesting choice, mainly because I don't think, this is something that PC gamers are very familiar with, having, games run at 120 frames. But for the console crowd, I don't think a lot of people have TVs that are going to support this. So that's going to be an interesting point to see if people are going to make that upgrade for this game.
Yeah,
go ahead, Zach, please.
I don't think that I don't think that Xbox really did themselves any favors by coming out of the gate with Halo in an unfinished form. You know what I mean? Like they had to come kind of scramble after the event and say, well, we're planning on adding ray tracing later. This is a work in progress thing. Like I think that a lot of what we saw from Halo Infinite at this latest Microsoft press conference or event, I should say, was totally reactionary to the press conference that they had in May, where people were left like pretty disappointed by not seeing a lot of the stuff that they anticipated to see then. So like, coming out of the gate with Halo in an unfinished form might not have been the best look for them, for sure. But then again, like, Halo is about the feel, right? Like I'm not a huge Halo player. I've not played a ton of Halo, but like that game is about the fluidity of the shooting and the way that those vehicles control and feel and things like that. And like, if those things feel correct and the mechanics are there and tight, like, does the graphical fidelity really matter that much? I think that's part of a bigger conversation.
Right, the spotlight is more intense because we're on that cusp between generations. We want the excitement. We want the e-ticket thing.
When who's to say that we're not looking at the Xbox One X version of this game when we're looking at the cinematics here? Like
Right.
the Microsoft's whole platform for this next generation is that you'll be able to play on both systems, and so who knows?
Yeah, I don't know if it was the right strategy decision. It's also interesting they talked about standing behind their decision to go in a retro direction. And I almost wonder if that in some way comes in a response to Bungie, who went on, of course, to make Destiny, and it wanting to be different and sort of returning to its roots as a way to split the time streams and differentiate from Destiny. But Destiny, I gotta say, has raised the bar in my mind for how fancy armor should be, and it's actually starting to make classic Master Chief look a little plain and simple to me.
A
I
lot of
think there's a bit of a
holographs.
Destiny effect. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm going off what Mitchell was saying about the frames per second, at least in the multiplayer modes, about being 120 frames. I'm all about more frames than, the graphics and the details. If it's a smooth experience, but maybe the graphic detail suffers a bit, I'm okay with that. That kind of excites me there. And I don't know, the game to me, it felt a lot like Halo, but I guess I was hoping for, and I've played all the Halo games. I was kind of hoping for almost a God of War kind of change, like not a completely different genre of game, but when the new God of War came out, it was like, oh, this is different. The franchise is going in a different direction. It feels different than the ones that have come before it. I was kind of hoping for something like that with the Halo Infinite reveal, instead of going back to its roots.
I do want to say that Mech Gaming over here in the chat does say that Microsoft said that it was running on a PC with comparable specs to the Series X. So that's just my unawareness of where that game was running on what platform. So,
But hey, speaking of commenters, you're good, man. Over at IGN.com, KDL Kubin says, Microsoft, here's a new gen console, but with retro graphics. Sorry, but that doesn't really make sense to me. And I think that just speaks to what I was saying about, I don't know if the initial decision of we decided to do a retro thing as our first offering on a thing that's supposed to evoke what the freshest, newest cutting edge is kind of at odds with each other.
I think it's crazy to call these retro graphics. Like, this game looks fine. Like, it looks, comparable to every PS4 and Xbox One X game out there right now. Like, people are comparing it to, other games like The Last of Us Part 2 or Halo 4 and 5 and saying like it doesn't look the same, but like this is a completely different genre for Halo, right? Like they're looking at an open world game, and I keep thinking about an article that Tom Marks wrote a few months ago that he actually caught some heat for, but this is kind of, I feel like this is sort of justification here when he said, like, in his article, don't expect next generation games to look mind blowing out of the gate. They're going to put that horsepower to use elsewhere, right? Like, it's going to be enemy behavior and physics and different kinds of horsepower allocated to different sorts of mechanics and memory and gameplay and things like that. And so, like, the idea that this game doesn't look as stellar as everybody is hoping, it might just be kind of a feather in Tom's cap at this point. Feather in Tom's cap? How old am I? What is that?
I was going to try to make a pun about mark my words, but people haven't said that since the 20s. I'll race you, man. I'll race you to the grave.
Not since Dickety 2.
Yeah. Yeah, well, in the interest of equal time, Autex says, I think this looks great. So they're not pulling the fans out of thin air. I think there's reaction on both sides. I'm not going to read the whole huge block where they actually tried to defray and address each complaint about the graphics. But they did say the team is committed and focused on making sure we have a beautiful world for players to explore when we launch. And we found out a few more concrete details. They're not sure, I guess I start with a non-concrete detail, but they're not sure whether a beta will happen or not. But they are hoping to, quote, have an opportunity for broader hands-on period before release. I don't know why you wouldn't just call that a beta, but I guess there's technical aspects. It will not have, microtransactions were confirmed, but they've reassured fans that it, quote, will not include any real money loot boxes. Although it will have a tremendous amount of armor customization. They said, quote, if you like the level of armor customization options in Halo Reach, you will be pleased. And last but not least, oh, I mentioned the grapple hook, which is confirmed will also be in multiplayer. But in multiplayer, you won't necessarily have it all the time. It'll be like, a pickup that you have limited use on, would be my guess. I think that rounds out our headline story. Anyone have any last final Halo thoughts or gotchas?
Not
All
on
right,
mine.
great. Then moving on to our second story, which is Craig Mazin. Should have looked it up before the show. But the man who brought us, along with a lot of other talented people, the series Chernobyl. Who's here's seen Chernobyl? I loved it.
Yeah, very good.
Phenomenal.
Very good
Mitchell,
show.
I'm just
recommended.
gonna be in the shame corner. I'm sorry.
It's totally a topic that didn't inherently appeal to me, but it's just good. You can't deny it's good. And I'll be honest, I'm always wary of video game adaptations, as I think a lot of us are. But when I heard it was the Chernobyl team on HBO, I trust them. I trust those hands. And David, you are more on the entertainment side of the equation as far as IGN goes. What do you know, or just give us your take on the Last of Us series coming to HBO?
Well, Craig Mazin won me over with Chernobyl. I mean, it was one of those things when I heard Chernobyl was coming out and I saw the trailer, I said, well, the trailer looks great. So, of course, I go on IMDb, I look at the creative team, and I see his name there, and I was like, okay, look at his credentials. He's got Hangover 2, Hangover 3. It's one of the writers. It's like, okay, those are fine movies. Okay, it's like, but, and then I saw Chernobyl and I was blown away. So anything he does now, I trust him. And I think if he does find some way to do what Damon Lindelof did with The Watchmen, finding a way to enhance the story, to bring something new while also honoring the past, honoring what's come before, honoring the original story, I think this could be fantastic. I mean, I can't imagine what it's like being a showrunner and having that responsibility, especially over something as big as The Last of Us. But if he can do that, especially with the way he did with Chernobyl and just great character development and all that kind of stuff, I think this could be really good. I mean, I'm always hopeful going into a new project, a big new TV show coming out. So I think he's the man for it if they're going to bring somebody in to do this.
Good on you keeping an air of hope about you when you see every show that comes out. Yeah, and the specific news today was just that, is that he says he plans to expand the universe with the series, not overwrite or undo anything from the game. And if the fan reaction to part 2 was any indication, this is a fan base that cares very much about the story as told and how you treat it, and that you treat it with the utmost respect. And I can see why. It's a story that made a ton of impact on me. So yeah, I think we're all very excited. Anyone else want to chime in on
Yeah, I
Last
think
of Us, please?
I think that for a limited run series like we would get for the Last of Us television show, you're probably looking at 8 to 10 episodes, which means 8 to 10 hours that are solely dedicated to story. When you've got a game like The Last of Us, the original, you're probably looking at like 13 hours to finish that game top to bottom. But a lot of that, obviously most of that, is dedicated to gameplay, right? Working your way through rooms and stealth, like doing the stuff that you do in a video game. But if you remove that, you have all this time to build around the story that's there. And I think that like David said, like Lindelof with like Lindelof with The Watchmen, you've got a lot of opportunity to take some of the smaller story moments and flesh them out, or some of the smaller characters and give them more motivation, more backstory. I'm really excited for this. I think it's a really cool move.
As we saw in a way with the DLC Left Behind, it's a story that is totally open to side stories. It's something that struck me in part 2 is there are so many more factions in this universe than I initially thought there were. So it seems like they have a lot of directions they could go. Madsen said, quote, "We're creating a new, but we're also reimagining what is already there to present a different format." Interesting. I don't know what different format could mean. Went on, "It's kind of a dream come true for me. I'm a little bit scared because a lot of emotions connected to this game are rather intense," which I think Neil Druckmann would agree.
Yeah.
Sorry, the quote ends, "I'm probably going to go hide in a bunker for a while because you can't make everyone happy."
Yeah.
It's funny coming from the Chernobyl guy. Sorry, Mitchell, you were going to say.
just gonna say the thing that I'm like you were saying, the thing I'm not sure about is the reimagining what's already there bit. What
Mhm.
was so great about Lindelof's The Watchmen was that it continued the story of the graphic novel in a way that made sense. Whereas I just don't know what kind of TV story I would get excited for with The Last of Us. I'm not excited to just see Joel and Ellie's story play out again. Like I've experienced the story beats so many times at this point that just watching it in TV form doesn't really excite me.
Pretty sure that's what it's gonna be though. Like,
Yeah, that's why I'm like this doesn't do much for me. As
yeah,
much as I'll probably watch it anyway. Especially because it comes from such a well-renowned creator in Mason. Um,
I'm in
but
your head.
but yeah, I'm not coming into this with really high or really low expectations. I'm gonna watch it because it's a video game adaptation, and I watch those.
sure.
Sure. I don't know that we didn't know anything definitive about cast. I think we don't, but I can't
I don't think so
absolutely
either.
confirm that we don't. But the big question to me is Ellen Page and Josh Brolin, or is that just too obvious? Is that
I
too
think
perfect?
I think both of those actors are probably a little too old and a little too well known.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you
Yeah,
watch Ellen Page in the Umbrella Academy, she doesn't look like Ellie anymore.
Yeah.
that's fair. Smitty81 on the site said, "Well, I'd love to see Josh Brolin as Joel. I think going with a more unknown actor would help more with immersion." And I can see that point. I guess I've been burned by Uncharted being this weird teen Nathan Drake period that
Mm-hmm.
if they're gonna bring this to the screen, it's interesting. At the same time that I completely agree with you, Mitchell, that there's something hollow about just translating what is already such a cinematic game to film. Uh, I would be sad if there wasn't like the giraffe moment or the falling off the balcony moment, without trying to spoil too much. But certain moments or at least aspects that I kind of want to see recreated. I don't know. I'll
I think
take
we're
the
also
take your knee
gonna
and then decide. Go ahead.
remember too is that it's going to a good home. I mean, HBO has such a great batting average when it comes to their great shows and they're not so great shows. Even their not so great shows, I always feel like are worth tuning in for and checking out because they do things that no one else on television does. They take risks. I mean, of course, Netflix, is out there, but I feel like if I'm gonna go with a network that I trust and want to watch whatever they put out, it's always HBO. Like I'm always gonna check out to see what they're making. So I think it's with a good creator and it's at a good home. So I'm hopeful, but we'll see. We'll have to see.
And honestly, it's just from the time I was a kid who loved video games to now being middle-aged loving video games, like to see imprints like HBO, the premiere, it's just awesome to see nerds have completely taken over every aspect of life. To me, to 10-year-old me, the idea that there would be a Watchmen series and then a Last of Us series, that's just that alone is so cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, but now I'm just waxing old man, so let's move on to our third story. Battletoads has a release date. That it's we're just in a time loop, you guys. It's just all happens again. That's right. Zitz, Rash, and Pimple are back, brah. In the classically difficult Battletoads. I think the most notable thing is the art style. It is supported by Rare, the original creators, but the art style you're seeing now, very cool, I think, and not I it took me so long to decipher that this is a game, not a cartoon. It looks absolutely like a Saturday morning cartoon to me. So I like that about it. Do we have any Battletoads fans or even anyone who dallied or got stopped in the jet bike level?
I've dallied with some Battletoads. It's funny when I first saw this art style in screenshots, I was like, "Oh, this looks terrible." But watching this trailer and seeing everything in motion and seeing, okay, like getting it, like they're going for this Saturday morning cartoon vibe, and yeah, I think they're nailing it. I think I'm much more excited about this game now than I ever was, seeing those initial screenshots or like the initial teaser about it. Battletoads is an interesting series to bring back because it is very much known for its difficulty. I would argue that the difficulty in Battletoads on the NES was the bad kind of difficulty, where it veers towards memorization as opposed to being able to react to the things that you are dealing with. Um, I don't so much get that vibe from watching this trailer. It doesn't seem to be leaning into that retro style of difficulty, because you can see right here, even the speeder bike level, you're able to see the things that are coming towards you. So it doesn't have that same kind of gotcha feel. But yeah, I'm excited about this.
The developers also have made it a little more accessible. There's going to be, well, not only couch co-op, but multiple difficulty settings. Of course, something you did not get in the arcade days when they just wanted those quarters flowing. That will, quote, suit everyone from Tadpole to Battletoad. I have to imagine those are the names of the difficulty settings. But I'm pleased with the resurgence of these left to right brawlers. We just had Streets of Rage 4. And connecting it even to things like Sonic Mania, I just really love this new form of curation where we reach back and take games that, frankly, from a technological standpoint these days, are easy-ish to put together and lavish some love and attention on them and put a real shine on a game. Battletoads is not a game I would pick up on emulation, but I will play this now that it exists, especially after seeing it in motion.
Are any of us a little concerned that the game has been like off the radar for a couple of years and now has a release date that is less than a month away with like kind of very little fanfare? You know, people have been asking about this game for a while. It's been kind of missing from a few shows for, you know, the last, since it was announced in 2018, I believe. And now that it's, you know, now that it's got a release date, I'm a little hesitant to be like, oh, this is great, because it's like, why haven't you been talking about this? Like, where has this been?
I think there's an element to it where they want to manage the hype. I don't think even the people who are really excited about Battletoads really expect it to be like this, system seller for the Xbox, where it's getting nines all over the place on Metacritic and OpenCritic. I think it's just going to be a fun co-op beat 'em up with some funny moments, and yeah, that's what I hope it is anyway. I hope it's not I hope they're not aiming to make this the legendarily difficult, reinvention of Battletoads.
Souls Toads, Dark Toads.
Yeah.
Hold my beer on site comments. Okay, they showed it's more than just a beat 'em up. I'm all in now. And I got to agree, that trailer shows these segments. First of all, they use the tagline, the multi-genre classic, which I remember the motorbike, the jet bike, and I remember going down wells and having to rappel. But it showed just different kinds of gameplay, as if at some points you'll do platformer, at some points you'll do like, it looks like a Space Invaders knockoff. So they are messing with the formula and they are going for the Saturday morning cartoon vibe. I'm cautiously optimistic that, like Mitchell said, this won't change my life, but this will kill several afternoons, and that's a good commodity in these quarantine times. All right. Last but not least, our last story of the day. Certainly not least. Oh, I just read what it was, and it snuck up behind me and snapped my neck. Splinter Cell. This news actually dropped yesterday, but it dropped so late we didn't really have time to talk about it, so we all wanted to squeal a little. Splinter Cell coming to Netflix as an animated series with, and this is really the squealable part, John Wick creator, one of the John Wick guys, bringing us Splinter Cell, the animated series, for Netflix. And as David just said, HBO is really top tier and has a long track record, but Netflix is out here. Netflix also deals some direct damage. So thoughts on Splinter Cell? I know I asked before who was Splinter Cell literate, because I'm only partially, and someone volunteered to go first. Was it Mitchell again?
Yeah.
Please.
It's funny. I hope I'm not jumping the gun here, but there was a comment on IGN that we saw that was something you have it in front of you, Swaim. So maybe you can read it out. But
Smog Gunner 0351 says, "We want a new game, you freaking morons." Speak on that, Mitchell.
Yeah, so I think that's really the story here. I think it's exciting that Splinter Cell is getting an animated series on Netflix. I think it's the best vehicle to bring back Michael Ironside into the franchise, because all he has to do is just voice act. He doesn't have to deal with motion capture or any of that stuff. and he's so iconic to the role. So that's exciting. But at the same time, man, it's time for a new Splinter Cell game. It's been so long, and I think it's especially time for a new return to roots, stealth focused Splinter Cell game. We've had Splinter Cell Conviction, and there was another one that was kind of like this action stealth focus, which was fine. But I think most people who claim to be like really big Splinter Cell fans, they love that series because it was one of the true pioneering stealth games alongside Metal Gear Solid, and even then, like those two games are very distinct with their gameplay stylings. So yeah, I think this is exciting. At the same time, Ubisoft, let's put some of those dollars that you have for making movies for your games and put them back into the game side.
That's true. They get that sentiment for a lot of their adaptation decisions. Okay, granted. I guess I felt that one existing doesn't lessen the opportunity of. In fact, if
Sure.
anything, right, if the series is a big hit, it would potentially bolster the idea that hey, maybe we should make the game. But that said, go ahead, David.
I was just surprised to see that Netflix is investing. They're doing 2 seasons, 2 8-episode seasons, so they must have some confidence. And I mean, Netflix likes to do that. They like to drop 6 or 7 episodes and call it a new season, even though if this was on Nickelodeon or something like that, it would probably run for a lot longer. But 2 seasons is a pretty good investment for a Splinter Cell series.
Yeah, definitely.
There's 3 seasons of Castlevania, but I think there's only like 14 episodes.
Exactly.
Right? Like they're pretty short seasons. I think it's also sort of dependent on who's attached, both talent-wise, actors and the production teams behind it. I wouldn't mind seeing a Splinter Cell from what's his name? Oh my god, the Castlevania guy.
Garth Ennis.
Adi Shankar.
Adi Shankar, the producer. Adi, yeah.
Producer. Yeah,
nailed it.
Yeah, sorry, that name totally escaped me. I think,
go ahead.
I think it could be really cool to have a Splinter Cell animated series. I think a lot of games lend themselves to this kind of adaptation. Obviously, like I mentioned Castlevania, which is like such a sick show. Like I love that show so much. But to Mitchell's point, also, like people want to see a lot of games from Ubisoft, and I think what people don't realize is like Ubisoft has an entire production branch like dedicated that they really are trying to spin up as like, hey, they're making TV shows already. They've got Mythic Quest that's theirs. They've done the Assassin's Creed movie. Like they've done the Prince of Persia film. Those two, obviously, mixed reviews.
And we talked about the Beyond Good and Evil 2, right?
Right.
Is that going to be a movie?
So I think Mitchell had said that it was, so like, Ubisoft is just looking to diversify their bonds. Essentially, like they just want to do everything, and they want to do it fast. So can't fault them for that.
So that I think that does lend credence to the theory that it doesn't necessarily diminish the chance of a game. It's almost like they're separate departments working in tandem with the same franchise IPs. I don't know that to be true, but I also don't know that this means there won't be a game or we've used up all our, resources. I was going to say siphon filter resources because I was a siphon filter guy. That didn't work out for me.
I was going to say, if this is something that can drum up excitement for Splinter Cell and lead to people wanting to buy another Splinter Cell game so badly that Ubisoft, I have to believe that Ubisoft is making a Splinter Cell game, because there was like a tweet like maybe a year or two ago that indicated that something was going on. So if it's something that will be the catalyst for this eventual Splinter Cell game to finally come out, I'm all for it.
Yeah, although I do agree with KZK Scorpion, who says should be live action. I imagine it's lower budget, and it's an excuse to bring Michael Ironside back. But I don't know. When you have the John Wick writer involved and it's a Tom Clancy property, it's mildly surprising that it's animated.
It's originally supposed to be Tom Hardy, which would have been really cool, I think, to see Tom Hardy in that role. But,
yeah, that would have been a good
for the live action version. Yeah.
Hey, but there ain't nothing wrong with the original, the person whose voice from the games getting brought into the mix. I appreciate that always.
That's fair too.
Yeah. we're just a little slightly bit over time, which we're allowed to be, but that's all of our stories. So I'm going to wrap it up here. Thank you so much for being here, guys, and spending a lovely Friday afternoon with me.
Always a pleasure.
Thanks for having us.
That's what I wanted to hear.
Yeah.
Big thank you to Borbar, producer, and of course, all you watching at home. We will be back with another news, games, and more Monday at 4 p.m. Pacific. See you then.